Excuse me, sir, would you like to try our premium sake selection? The entire restaurant freezes. Every conversation stops, every head turns, because the black waitress just spoke perfect Japanese to the quiet man in the corner. The man's eyes widened in shock. The wealthy businessman who's been complaining about these people drops his fork. The hostess stares with her mouth open. Nobody expected this, especially not in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, where crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables that cost more than most monthly salaries, where the man in the simple gray suit has been sitting ignored for 45 minutes like invisible furniture, where Keisha Williams, 28, has been serving tables and taking insults from customers who see only her uniform, never her mind. But now, everything changes. Because what nobody in this room knows is that they've been ignoring a billionaire. And the one person who finally saw him isn't who they expected. Let's go back to how this all started. Hiroshi Tanaka had been sitting at table 12 for exactly 47 minutes. His simple gray suit and quiet demeanor made him invisible to everyone in the restaurant. The hostess had seated him in the corner like he was something to hide. His water glass remained empty. 3 different servers had walked past without acknowledgement. When he'd raised his hand politely, they'd looked right through him. The manager, David Collins, finally approached with barely concealed irritation. "Sir, are you ready to order or do you need more time to understand the menu?" His tone dripped with condescension. He spoke slowly as if addressing a child. Hiroshi's face remained calm, but his hands tightened slightly on the menu. "I would simply like to order dinner, please." At the neighboring table, the wealthy couple exchanged glances. "Maybe he's waiting for someone to translate," the woman whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. The businessman at table 8 was less subtle. "These Asian guys always take forever, probably can't even read English properly." David nodded sympathetically toward the complaining customer, then returned to Hiroshi with fake patience. "Sir, if you're having difficulty with our menu, perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the Chinese restaurant down the street?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Hiroshi's composure cracked for just a moment. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. In Japanese, he whispered to himself, "Why is this so difficult? Am I not human?" Nobody understood what he'd said. Nobody cared to listen. He placed a $20 bill on the table, payment for water he'd barely touched, and began to stand. After 47 minutes of systematic humiliation, he was ready to leave. That's when Keisha Williams, refilling water glasses 3 tables away, heard the Japanese words. She stopped mid-pour. Unlike everyone else in this room, she recognized the pain in those words, the isolation, the quiet dignity being slowly stripped away. She'd felt that same invisibility every single day. What she did next would change both their lives forever. Keisha set down her water pitcher and approached table 12. Every instinct told her to stay invisible. Stay safe. David Collins hated when staff had extended interactions with customers, but she couldn't ignore the pain she'd heard in that man's voice. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly in English first, then switched to perfect Japanese. "I apologize for how you've been treated. May I help you with anything?" Hiroshi's head snapped up. His eyes widened in complete shock. You speak Japanese?" The businessman at table 8 stopped mid-chew. The wealthy couple fell silent. Even David, halfway across the room, paused to stare. "Yes, a little," Keisha replied in Japanese, her tone respectful and warm. "My name is Keisha. What you said just now about feeling invisible, I understand that feeling." Hiroshi studied her face, searching for signs of mockery or manipulation. Instead, he found genuine compassion. "Where did you learn to speak like this?" he asked, still in Japanese. "I studied Japanese culture at Columbia University. My professor was Yukiko Matsumoto from Tokyo University." The shock on Hiroshi's face deepened. Professor Matsumoto was legendary in academic circles. "You studied at Columbia?" His voice carried disbelief mixed with growing respect. David Collins approached their table, clearly uncomfortable with the extended conversation. "Keisha, I'm sure our guest can handle the menu himself. We don't want to overwhelm customers with excessive conversation." Hiroshi held up a gentle hand. "Actually, she's being very helpful. Please continue." Keisha felt the weight of David's disapproval, but something in Hiroshi's eyes encouraged her to persist. "If you'd like," she said in Japanese, "I could recommend some dishes. Our chef trained in Kyoto, so he understands authentic preparation. What would you suggest for someone who's had a very long, difficult day? The question carried deeper meaning. Keisha understood immediately. Perhaps the omakase menu? It means, I trust you, letting the chef choose what's best. Sometimes when we're tired of making decisions, it's good to trust someone else's judgment. Brad, the waiter who'd been ignoring Hiroshi, suddenly appeared with a warm towel and special menu. His sudden attention felt hollow and desperate. Can I get you anything else, sir? Perhaps some wine recommendations? Hiroshi barely acknowledged him, keeping his focus on Keisha. You said you understand feeling invisible, he said in Japanese. But you have education, knowledge. Why do you work here? Keisha's smile carried a hint of sadness. Student loans. Sometimes life doesn't care about your degrees. But wherever I work, my knowledge stays with me. Something shifted in Hiroshi's expression. Recognition, respect, understanding. From the kitchen emerged Chef Yamamoto, drawn by the sound of authentic Japanese conversation. When he heard Hiroshi speak, the formal business language, the cultural sophistication, his entire posture changed. Sir, Yamamoto said with a proper bow, it's an honor to serve you. They exchanged business cards with traditional etiquette. Yamamoto's eyes widened as he read the card. Do you know who this is? He whispered urgently to David. This is Hiroshi Tanaka. He owns the largest hospitality empire in Asia. David's face went pale. The businessman at table 8 stopped complaining. The wealthy couple leaned forward with sudden interest. The atmosphere in the restaurant transformed instantly. Servers who'd ignored Hiroshi for nearly an hour suddenly materialized with apologies and offers, but Hiroshi's attention remained fixed on Keisha. You're the only person who treated me with dignity before knowing my name, he said in Japanese. That tells me everything about your character. The businessman at table 8, who'd been making racist comments all evening, now wore a nervous smile. Excuse me, sir, I hope you're enjoying your dining experience. Hiroshi looked at him with cool politeness. The service has been educational. Keisha watched this transformation with mixed emotions. She was glad for Hiroshi's vindication, but troubled by how quickly people's respect could turn on and off based on wealth and status. Money changes how people see you, she observed quietly in Japanese. Yes, Hiroshi replied, but wisdom sees people before money does. You have that wisdom. Unknown to them both, a customer in the corner booth had been filming the entire interaction. The video would be uploaded with a simple caption, "Watch how this restaurant's attitude changed the moment they realized who this man was." By morning, everything would be different. 3 months earlier, Hiroshi Tanaka had made a decision that puzzled his entire board of directors. He would travel to America alone, no security detail, no executive assistants, no obvious displays of wealth. I want to be seen as a person, not a position, he'd told them in Tokyo. His wife's death from cancer 6 months prior had changed everything. In her final days, she'd been cared for by a Nigerian nurse named Grace, who spoke perfect Japanese, better than most of his own staff. Grace had made his wife's last weeks bearable by connecting with her in her native language. But Hiroshi watched in horror as doctors and hospital administrators treated Grace as invisible furniture. Her education, her compassion, her brilliance, none of it mattered because they couldn't see past her uniform. Find people who see hearts, not titles, his wife had whispered before she died. So Hiroshi came to America seeking authentic human connection. He stayed in modest hotels, took regular taxis, wore simple clothes. He wanted to experience life as an ordinary person. The result was systematic invisibility. Bank tellers spoke to him slowly. Restaurant hosts seated him poorly. Taxi drivers assumed he couldn't speak English. Store clerks watched him with suspicion, each slight cut deeper than business rivals ever could. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Keisha Williams was fighting her own battle against invisibility. Columbia University, 2019. She'd graduated with a master's degree in Japanese studies, alone because her family couldn't afford the trip from Detroit. Student debt, $127,000. 47 job applications, 47 rejections. Overqualified for entry-level positions. Insufficient experience for senior roles. The coded language always meant the same thing. You don't fit our image. The restaurant job wasn't her plan B. It was survival. But she'd made a choice. Excellence everywhere, even in serving tables. Her grandmother's voice echoed constantly. Baby, your mind is the bridge between worlds. Somebody's going to need that bridge. Every day, she translated more than just languages. She translated dignity for customers who couldn't see her education. She translated patience for colleagues who couldn't understand her dreams. She translated hope for herself when the weight of invisibility felt crushing. Both Hiroshi and Keisha had learned the same painful lesson. In America, your worth often depends on other people's assumptions. Neither knew they were about to save each other from that lonely truth. The next morning, David Collins called an emergency staff meeting. His face was tight with barely controlled panic. What happened last night was unusual, he began, pacing in front of the assembled waitstaff. Keisha, I appreciate your language skills, but engaging customers in extended personal conversations violates our protocols. Keisha kept her expression neutral. I was helping a customer who seemed distressed, Mr. Collins. Distressed? Brad, the waiter who'd ignored Hiroshi all evening, scoffed. He looked fine to me. Maybe you misread the situation because of cultural assumptions. The coded language wasn't lost on anyone in the room. David nodded approvingly at Brad's comment. Exactly. High-end customers expect professional boundaries. They're not looking for cultural exchanges with waitstaff. Marcus, the kitchen prep cook, spoke up from the doorway. Man, that customer looked ready to walk out until Keisha helped him. Y'all are tripping. Marcus, please focus on kitchen duties. David snapped. Front-of-house operations are my responsibility. 2 hours later, the phone rang. David answered with his usual professional tone. Manhattan Premier, this is David. Oh, Mr. Tanaka, of course I remember you. David's voice became suddenly obsequious. A private dinner? Absolutely, we'd be honored. What's that? You want to speak with Keisha specifically? The color drained from David's face. Sir, I'm the manager. I handle all private bookings. Miss Williams is entry-level staff. Hiroshi's voice was polite but firm. Please put Keisha on the phone. She understands my requirements. David reluctantly handed Keisha the phone, his warning glare unmistakable. This is Keisha, she said carefully. Keisha-san? Hiroshi's warm voice filled her ear. I'd like to host a dinner for 6 Japanese executives next week. I need someone who understands proper cultural protocols. For the next 10 minutes, Keisha discussed seating arrangements based on hierarchy, sake service rituals, business card etiquette, and menu timing for business discussions. Her knowledge was encyclopedic. David listened with growing alarm. He was realizing that Keisha possessed expertise he completely lacked for this high-value booking. After she hung up, David made a phone call of his own. Rick, it's David Collins. Listen, I've got a situation. This Japanese businessman wants to book our private room, but he's gotten attached to one of our less experienced staff. I'm worried about professional representation. Richard Steinberg, David's friend at Goldman Sachs, was intrigued. What's his name? Tanaka. Probably some small import business. There was a pause. David, that might be Hiroshi Tanaka. If it is, you're talking about a billionaire. A what? I'll help you handle this properly. Bring in some real cultural consultants to show this waitress what professional expertise looks like. The conspiracy was born. Over the next few days, David implemented his sabotage strategy. He scheduled Keisha for double shifts, claiming she needed proper training for such an important event. Exhaustion was the goal. Brad escalated his social media attacks, posting in the staff group chat. Anyone else think Keisha's trying too hard? Showing off for a rich Asian guy? Probably thinks she hit the jackpot. The peer pressure mounted. Sarah, initially supportive, began to distance herself. Other servers whispered when Keisha passed. Marcus pulled her aside during a break. They're setting you up, girl. I've seen this before. They're giving you enough rope to hang yourself. But Keisha refused to be intimidated. Despite exhaustion, she spent her free time researching Japanese business protocols, practicing sake service, and preparing for the most important night of her career. She had no idea that David and Richard were planning her public humiliation. The conspiracy deepened at Murphy's Bar, where David Collins met Richard Steinberg over expensive whiskey. The lighting was dim, perfect for plotting someone's downfall. Here's what we do, Richard said, sliding a business card across the table. James Morrison, Harvard MBA, Asia-Pacific specialist. He'll show up as a potential partner and demonstrate real cultural expertise. David nodded eagerly. Make the waitress look like an amateur? Exactly. These Japanese executives don't mess around. One mistake from her and your restaurant's reputation is toast. Morrison will save the day. Richard pulled out his phone. James, it's Rick. Remember that favor you owe me? There's this waitress who thinks she can play in our league because she speaks some Japanese. Back at the restaurant, David launched his psychological warfare campaign. He gathered the staff for another briefing. I'm worried Keisha's getting in over her head, he announced. These Japanese businessmen are ruthless. One cultural misstep could destroy our reputation. Brad jumped in eagerly. Maybe we should have backup plans, in case she crashes and burns. Sarah shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The peer pressure was working. I heard she's only got a degree from some state school, Brad continued his lies. These executives went to Tokyo University. They'll see right through her fake expertise. David planted seeds of doubt everywhere. Are you sure you understand sake temperature preferences? He asked Keisha during prep. Japanese business culture is very unforgiving of mistakes. The comments were designed to shatter confidence. I hope you know what you're doing, became his constant refrain. Meanwhile, Richard was orchestrating a media ambush. He called the food blogger who covered high-end restaurant events. There might be some interesting cultural dynamics at this dinner, he hinted. Could be a story worth covering. The blogger agreed to attend, expecting entertainment from cultural collision. James Morrison spent days preparing his attack strategy. He researched Keisha's background, looking for weaknesses to exploit. A Columbia degree doesn't mean practical business experience, he told Richard. I'll expose her theoretical knowledge as useless in real negotiations. David escalated the workplace hostility. He accidentally provided wrong dietary information for one Japanese executive, hoping to create an embarrassing mistake for Keisha to handle. He scheduled her for prep work until 2 a.m., then required early arrival the next day for final checks. Sleep deprivation would make her vulnerable. Tonight's dinner is make or break for our restaurant's reputation, David announced to all staff, putting maximum pressure on Keisha publicly. Brad's attacks became openly racist. In the staff WhatsApp group, he posted, Bet she's sleeping with the old guy. How else does a waitress get this opportunity? The message was deleted quickly, but the damage was done. Other staff members saw how far the attacks had escalated. Sarah finally spoke up privately. This feels wrong, Brad. She's really smart. Don't get dragged down when she fails, he warned. These people always stick together. Marcus overheard a crucial conversation between David and Richard about bringing in professional expertise to humiliate Keisha. He found her in the supply closet, organizing napkins with shaking hands. They're planning something bad tomorrow night, he warned. They got outside help coming to make you look stupid, cameras too. Keisha's composure finally cracked. Marcus, what if they're right? What if I really am out of my league? Girl, listen to me. You got more knowledge in your pinky than these fools got in their whole heads. Trust yourself. But as Keisha prepared for the dinner that could make or destroy her future, the weight of systematic sabotage was crushing. Everyone except Marcus and Hiroshi wanted her to fail. She had no idea how vicious the attack would be. The private dining room gleamed under soft lighting. Keisha had spent hours perfecting every detail despite David's attempts at sabotage. Traditional flower arrangements, proper sake placement, seating cards arranged by hierarchy. The Japanese executives arrived precisely on time, 6 distinguished men in immaculate suits. Their respectful bows and careful attention to protocol immediately revealed their sophistication. Then the ambush began. Hiroshi! James Morrison strode in with calculated confidence, Richard Steinberg close behind. I brought some additional cultural expertise. Thought you could use real professionals for something this important. David appeared with a nervous smile. Mr. Tanaka, we've assembled our best team. Keisha will be assisted by these experienced consultants. The word assisted dripped with condescension. James immediately took charge. Gentlemen, welcome. I'm James Morrison, Harvard Business School, 20 years of Asia-Pacific experience. He handed out business cards with flourish, completely bypassing Keisha. Executive Koji Sato asked a question in rapid Japanese about sake preferences. James froze, clearly not understanding. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that in English?" James stammered. Keisha stepped forward smoothly. "Sato-san is asking whether you prefer Junmai or Honjozo-style sake, and if you have regional preferences." She continued in perfect Japanese, explaining the subtle differences between brewing methods and regional characteristics. Sato's face lit up with appreciation. James quickly jumped in. "Yes, exactly what I was about to suggest. Regional considerations are crucial." But his generic response fooled no one. Executive Yuki Taniguchi tested deeper waters, asking about gift-giving protocols for American business partners. James offered textbook answers about respecting cultural differences. Keisha provided specific guidance, hierarchy levels in gift exchange, seasonal timing considerations, appropriate presentation ceremonies, and regional variations within Japan. The executives exchanged impressed glances. Someone finally understood their culture's complexity. Richard tried to derail the conversation. "Perhaps we should focus on practical business matters rather than academic cultural theory." He posed a complex market entry question, expecting to expose Keisha's inexperience. Instead, she outlined a sophisticated strategy: phased market entry, respecting relationship-building timelines, cultural credibility establishment before expansion, partnership structures honoring Japanese values, and risk mitigation through cultural understanding. James grew desperate. "That's very theoretical, but American business moves faster. Proven models work better than experimental approaches." Executive Sato's response was ice cold. "Morrison-san, your proposal ignores everything we just explained about our values. We are not looking for fast. We are looking for right." The food blogger, positioned discreetly in the corner, caught every moment on camera. This wasn't the cultural collision she'd expected. It was a masterclass in expertise versus credentials. David's technical sabotage backfired spectacularly. When Keisha discovered his wrong dietary information, she improvised flawlessly using her cultural knowledge, creating alternative dishes that honored Japanese dietary customs. Marcus and the kitchen staff secretly supported her, ensuring perfect execution despite management interference. The turning point came when Taniguchi addressed Keisha directly. "Williams-san, would you consider consulting for our American expansion?" James's mask finally slipped. "She's not qualified for international consulting. She's just a waitress." The room fell silent. The cultural insult was profound. Hiroshi's voice carried quiet authority. "Morrison-san, Keisha-san understands our culture better than consultants I've paid millions." The Japanese executives began discussing terms with Keisha, completely ignoring James and Richard. The blogger captured James's meltdown, including his obvious racial and classist bias. As the evening progressed, the contrast became undeniable. Authentic expertise versus hollow credentials. Cultural understanding versus cultural appropriation. Respect versus exploitation. By dessert, James and Richard had slipped away, their humiliation complete. The dinner ended with Japanese executives formally requesting Keisha's consulting services and praising the restaurant's exceptional cultural sensitivity. David was forced to publicly acknowledge Keisha's success while cameras rolled. The next morning, Hiroshi's hotel suite buzzed with excitement. 6 Japanese executives sat around the conference table, all talking at once about the previous night's dinner. "Tanaka-san, Williams-san is extraordinary," Executive Sato beamed. "Can we bring her to our company? Her cultural understanding surpasses Harvard professors," added Taniguchi. "We must have her lead our American expansion." Hiroshi smiled, knowing this moment would change Keisha's life forever. But across town, forces were already moving against her. James Morrison was on the phone with business journalists, his voice tight with wounded pride. "I'm telling you, this is a diversity hire gone wrong. Tanaka hired a waitress with questionable credentials." He spread rumors methodically. "She probably bought her degree online. Japanese companies are notorious for these publicity stunts." Richard Steinberg worked for his Goldman Sachs network. "Anonymous source says she's completely unqualified. Someone should verify her Columbia credentials." The attacks went viral on business social media. Coordinated bot accounts amplified every negative comment. Racist speculation about her relationship with Hiroshi flooded comment sections. Back at the restaurant, David's retaliation was swift and vicious. He fired Marcus for insubordination. His real crime was supporting Keisha. She abandoned her responsibilities. David told anyone who would listen. Used our restaurant for personal gain, then left us high and dry. Brad gave interviews to food bloggers, painting Keisha as attention-seeking and disruptive. She made other customers uncomfortable with her behavior. But Hiroshi was ready for war. He called Keisha to his hotel suite, where the Japanese board waited with formal documents. "Keisha-san," he said warmly, "we have an offer. Director of Cultural Integration for Tanaka Global Americas. Starting salary, $180,000 plus performance bonuses." Keisha's eyes widened. The amount was life-changing. "You would train in Tokyo for 3 months, then return to build our American operations," Executive Sato explained. "But sir," Keisha hesitated, "the attacks online, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not ready for this level of responsibility." Hiroshi's expression grew serious. "Keisha-san, when people attack your success this viciously, it proves how much they fear your talent." He showed her his phone. 5 major corporations requesting her consultation, a Japanese embassy invitation, Columbia professor recommending her for a visiting lecturer position. "Your expertise saved a $50 million partnership last night," Taniguchi added. "You handled the cultural complexity that destroyed our Harvard-educated consultant." Hiroshi announced his counter-strategy. "We're going public. Business conference keynote, media interviews, academic speaking engagements. Let your work speak louder than their lies." The PR firm he hired began distributing video testimonials from last night's executives. The footage of James's meltdown went viral for different reasons, exposing the ugly bias behind credentialism. "Time magazine wants to feature you as a rising star in global business," the PR manager announced. "Congressional hearings on international business competitiveness want your testimony." James's attacks were backfiring spectacularly. Every attempt to diminish Keisha only highlighted his own inadequacy. At the International Business Summit, Hiroshi made his move. With cameras rolling and hundreds watching, he formally announced their partnership. "Excellence has no uniform," he declared. "Wisdom recognizes talent wherever it appears." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Keisha's transformation was complete. From invisible waitress to internationally recognized expert in 6 months. But James Morrison wasn't finished. He was planning one final desperate attack. Before heading to Tokyo, Keisha made one final stop. Mrs. Rodriguez lived in the same Brooklyn apartment building 2 floors up from Keisha's tiny studio. At 75, she'd become the grandmother Keisha never had. "Mija," Mrs. Rodriguez said, opening her door with flour-dusted hands. "You look worried. Success should make you happy, no?" Keisha sank into the familiar kitchen chair where she'd studied for finals, cried over rejections, and dreamed of better days. "What if they're right, Mrs. Rodriguez? What if I really don't belong in that world?" Mrs. Rodriguez set down her mixing bowl. "When I came here from Puerto Rico, I had a nursing degree from San Juan. You know what they called me? Cleaning lady. For 30 years, cleaning lady." She pulled out an old photograph, herself in a nurse's uniform, young and proud. "But I never stopped being a nurse up here," she tapped her temple. "Knowledge doesn't leave because people can't see it." Keisha's phone buzzed with another wave of attack notifications. The comments were getting more vicious. "Diversity hires taking jobs from real Americans. Sleeping her way to the top. Fake expert with bought credentials." Mrs. Rodriguez glanced at the phone and shook her head. "Mija, bullies only attack when they're scared. They are scared of your light." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small velvet box. Inside was her mother's rosary, worn smooth by decades of prayers, for protection against people who try to make you small. The apartment doorbell rang. Mrs. Rodriguez shuffled to answer it. Hiroshi stood in the hallway, slightly out of place but respectful. He bowed formally to the elderly woman. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I presume. I'm here to collect Keisha for our flight." Mrs. Rodriguez studied him carefully, then turned to Keisha and spoke in rapid Spanish. "Este hombre ve tu alma, mija. Él es bueno." Keisha translated with a smile. "She says you see my soul and you're good people." Hiroshi bowed again. "Thank you for caring for someone so special." Mrs. Rodriguez beamed, charmed by his respect despite the language barrier. As they gathered Keisha's luggage, her phone exploded with notifications again. Another coordinated attack was trending. "Keisha-san, Hiroshi said gently. In Japan, we say fall 7 times, stand up 8. These attacks mean you're rising. Mrs. Rodriguez, though she couldn't understand the details, recognized the pattern. Mija, when you shine bright, some people try to blow out your candle, but you're not a candle. You're the sun. At the airport, paparazzi tried to provoke reactions to the latest online attacks. Instead of taking the bait, Keisha spoke only about cultural bridge building and creating opportunities. The reporters, expecting anger or defensiveness, got thoughtful professionalism instead. As they boarded first class to Tokyo, Keisha carried 3 things: Mrs. Rodriguez's rosary for protection, Hiroshi's partnership for opportunity, and her own unshakable knowledge for power. 3 months later, Keisha stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Tanaka Global's Tokyo headquarters. The city sprawled beneath her like a living circuit board. Her Japanese was now flawless, her cultural understanding deeper than ever. Today's presentation would determine the future of Tanaka's American expansion. 20 executives from Japan, Korea, and Singapore filled the boardroom, representing billions in potential investment. Keisha had prepared for weeks. Her strategy combined authentic cultural intelligence with hard business data. She was ready. Then the elevator doors opened. James Morrison walked in like he owned the building, flanked by 3 Harvard MBAs in identical Navy suits. His confidence was absolute, his smile predatory. "Hiroshi!" James boomed, arms spread wide. "Surprise! I brought some real expertise to help with this crucial presentation." The blood drained from Keisha's face. How was he here? How had he gotten past security? "I represent a consortium of American investors," James announced to the room. "We're here to ensure this expansion receives proper professional guidance." Hiroshi's expression hardened. "Morrison-san, this is a private board meeting. Of course, but given the stakes involved, we're talking billions. My investors insisted on providing additional resources." James gestured to his team. Harvard MBAs, each with 20 years of experience, proven track record with Fortune 500 partnerships. The Korean and Singaporean executives looked uncertain. On paper, James's credentials were impressive. "Now," James continued, his voice dripping with false humility, "while we appreciate diversity initiatives, successful American expansion requires proven business leadership, not academic theory." The insult hung in the air like poison. Executive Nakamura, the most senior board member, spoke carefully. "Morrison-san, we've seen impressive results from William-san's approach." "Results?" James laughed dismissively. "A few lucky meetings don't constitute strategic expertise. American business doesn't have time for cultural hand-holding. We need results, not sociology lessons." His team nodded in synchronized agreement, spreading out documents filled with charts and graphs. "We've prepared a comprehensive market penetration strategy," one Harvard MBA announced. "Standard protocols, proven efficiency metrics, aggressive timeline optimization." Keisha watched her months of careful work being dismissed as amateur nonsense. The executives looked increasingly swayed by the credential display. James pressed his advantage. "Honorable board members, you're about to bet your American expansion on a waitress who got lucky. Is that the leadership you want representing your company internationally?" The room fell silent. The cultural insult was devastating. Hiroshi started to respond, but Keisha stood first. "Morrison-san raises an important point about credentials," she said calmly. "Let's test them." She walked to the whiteboard, her movements controlled despite her racing heart. "Nakamura-san, yesterday you mentioned the failed Texas automotive venture. Could you describe the scenario for both consulting teams?" Nakamura nodded gravely. "Japanese luxury car manufacturer entering Dallas market. Union negotiations, cultural resistance, community relations. The project failed, costing $50 million. James's team huddled briefly, then their lead consultant spoke. "Classic market penetration failure. Insufficient marketing budget, poor timing, inadequate stakeholder management, standard solutions, increase advertising spend, streamline operations, focus on efficiency metrics." The executives looked impressed by the confident delivery. "And William-san?" Nakamura prompted. Keisha studied the scenario from every angle. The failure wasn't financial, it was cultural. Japanese management style conflicted with Texas worker culture. The company ignored local business relationship customs, failed to build trust with community leaders, and misunderstood American manufacturing worker expectations, she continued. Texans value directness and respect for individual contribution. Japanese hierarchical communication felt dismissive. The union resistance wasn't about money. It was about feeling disrespected. The room grew quiet. She was describing the exact cultural landmines that had destroyed the project. Furthermore, Keisha added, the company tried to impose Japanese efficiency standards without explaining the underlying philosophy. Workers felt micromanaged rather than honored for their expertise. Nakamura's eyes widened. Williamson has identified the precise failures that cost us $50 million. James's confidence wavered. That's very theoretical. But what about practical solutions? Phase-based integration, Keisha replied immediately. Start with cultural credibility building. Partner with respected local businesses. Hire Texas managers who understand regional culture but appreciate Japanese quality philosophy. Create a hybrid management approach that honors both cultural strengths. The Korean executive leaned forward. This addresses our Samsung partnership concerns perfectly. James's desperation showed. Gentlemen, you're overthinking this. American business is about speed and efficiency, not cultural sensitivity seminars. Executive Yamamoto's voice turned ice cold. Morrison-san, that attitude is exactly why American companies fail in our markets. The tide was turning. James's Harvard credentials were crumbling against Keisha's cultural intelligence. But he wasn't finished. Let's talk about real numbers. My team has generated over $200 million in partnerships using proven American business models. Hiroshi finally spoke. Morrison-san, in 3 months, Williamson has secured 5 major American partnerships worth $500 million. 0 cultural incidents, 0 partnership failures, 95% client satisfaction rate. The numbers hit like thunderbolts. Your firm's similar projects, Hiroshi continued, consulting his tablet, show 40% cultural misunderstanding rates, 60% partnership retention, and average $10 million losses per cultural mistake. The Singapore executive whistled softly. The data was devastating. James's final desperate play? She's not qualified for international consulting. She's just a waitress who speaks some Japanese. The cultural insults silenced the room completely. Hiroshi stood slowly. Morrison-san, that waitress understands our business better than consultants I've paid millions. Her expertise has revolutionized how we approach cultural integration. Executive Taniguchi addressed Keisha directly. Williamson, would you accept a permanent position as our Director of International Cultural Strategy? With full board authority, added Nakamura, and a budget for global team expansion. The Japanese executives voted unanimously. The Koreans and Singaporeans followed immediately. James's humiliation was complete. His investors, watching via video conference, ended the call abruptly. Business media covering the meeting reported the story as Cultural Intelligence Revolution Defeats Traditional Consulting. Within hours, Harvard Business School was fielding calls about updating their international curriculum. James Morrison's consulting firm collapsed within a week. But for Keisha, standing in that Tokyo boardroom with unanimous support from some of Asia's most powerful executives, the moment represented something beyond personal victory. She had proven that authentic expertise trumps credentialism, that cultural intelligence matters more than traditional metrics, that wisdom recognizes talent regardless of background. The invisible waitress had become invaluable. 1 year later, the transformation was complete. The restaurant where it all began had been renovated into something extraordinary. The same crystal chandeliers cast warm light, but now they illuminated the grand opening of the Cultural Bridge Institute. The space where Keisha once served tables had become a training center for cross-cultural excellence. 500 guests filled the dining room. Fortune 500 CEOs mingled with former service workers. Government officials shared conversations with scholarship recipients. The international media documented every moment. At table 12, the exact spot where Hiroshi had been ignored, stood a bronze plaque, where dignity recognized genius and everything changed. Keisha, now 30, addressed the crowd from the same corner where she'd once been invisible. Her navy blazer was tailored perfectly, her confidence absolute. The transformation from overlooked waitress to globally recognized expert was complete. 1 year ago, I stood in this room carrying a water pitcher, she began. Tonight I stand here because someone chose to see potential instead of position. The applause was thunderous. Marcus stepped to the microphone next, wearing the cap and gown of his engineering graduation. His voice carried pride and disbelief in equal measure. They tried to keep us invisible, he said, gesturing to dozens of former service workers in the audience. But Keisha showed the world we've been here all along, waiting for someone with wisdom to see us. The audience erupted. These weren't just career changes. These were lives reclaimed. David Collins sat in the back row, no longer a restaurant manager, but a maintenance worker at the Institute. The humbling had been swift and absolute after his discrimination practices destroyed the restaurant's reputation. He raised his hand during the quanda. I owe a public apology to Keisha and everyone I failed to see properly. I spent so long looking at uniforms I forgot to see minds. His transformation wasn't complete, but it was genuine. The Institute had given him a chance for redemption through service. Brad wasn't so fortunate. His racist social media posts had gone viral for all the wrong reasons. Fired from 3 jobs in succession, he'd learned the hard way that hate has consequences. He wasn't present tonight. Some bridges burned completely. But Richard Steinberg was there, sitting uncomfortably near the front. Goldman Sachs had forced him into extensive diversity training after discrimination complaints. He approached Keisha during the reception. I was wrong, he said simply. My prejudices nearly cost our firm the most valuable consultant we've ever worked with. It wasn't eloquent, but it was honest. The evening's centerpiece moment came when James Morrison appeared at the registration table. The once arrogant Harvard consultant looked genuinely humbled, wearing a simple gray suit reminiscent of Hiroshi's understated style. I'd like to apply for your cultural sensitivity training program, he told the volunteer. Entry level, I have a lot to learn. Keisha approached him personally. James, we have an opening in our foundation program. It's not glamorous work, filing, research, basic support. But if you're serious about learning, he nodded gratefully. I spent so long believing credentials mattered more than character. I'd like to discover what I missed. The poetic justice was perfect. The man who'd called her just a waitress was now asking to work for her. The success statistics were staggering. Cultural Bridge Institute had graduated 5,000 people in its first year. 300 companies had implemented cultural intelligence programs. 2,000 service workers had been promoted to professional roles. Cross-cultural business success rates had improved 400% industry-wide. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared on the video screen from her assisted living facility, tears streaming down her weathered face. At 80, she was too frail to travel, but her pride was infinite. Mija, you took that beautiful mind and lit up the whole world. Your ancestors are dancing tonight. The emotional impact was overwhelming. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Hiroshi took the stage next, his friendship with Keisha having deepened into one of business history's most successful partnerships. From table 12, he said, gesturing to the bronze plaque, we built bridges across cultures, industries, continents, all because someone chose to see worth instead of uniform. Their partnership had facilitated over $2 billion in international business. The Tanaka-Williams cultural integration model was being adopted on 6 continents. The evening's surprise guest was revealed when Senator Martinez stepped to the microphone. The Hidden Talent Act passed with bipartisan support, she announced. Tax incentives for skills-based hiring are now federal law. The policy impact was revolutionary. 50,000 service workers had applied for professional positions after hearing Keisha's story. Unemployment among college graduates working service jobs had dropped 30%. University programs were changing too. Columbia had endowed the Keisha Williams Chair in Cross-Cultural Business Studies. 15 other universities created similar programs. Cultural Bridge Studies was becoming a legitimate academic field. The global movement was undeniable. Similar institutes were opening in London, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Lagos. The United Nations had adopted cultural bridge education as a standard curriculum for international development, but perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The original businessman who had insulted both Hiroshi and Keisha that first night approached the microphone during open comments. I was sitting at table 8 the night this all began, he said, his voice shaky with emotion. I said terrible things, made racist assumptions, embodied everything wrong with how we see each other. His confession was raw and public. Watching what Keisha and Hiroshi built from that moment of human decency, it changed me. I've spent this year volunteering at homeless shelters, learning to see people I used to ignore. The redemption wasn't just professional. It was spiritual. As the evening wound down, Keisha and Hiroshi returned to table 12. They sat in the same chairs where their friendship began, now surrounded by photos of lives transformed and dreams realized. "Did you ever imagine this?" Keisha asked. "I hoped for one authentic connection," Hiroshi replied. "Instead, we connected the world." The final moment came when 10-year-old Maria, daughter of a scholarship recipient, approached their table. "Miss Williams, my mama says you help people see each other. Can you teach me how to do that?" Keisha knelt to Maria's level. "You already know how, sweetheart. You just have to remember that everyone has gifts, even when they're hidden." The child nodded solemnly, then skipped back to her mother, part of the generation that would inherit a world where recognition was normal, not revolutionary. The bronze plaque at table 12 caught the light one final time, where dignity recognized genius and everything changed. But the real monument wasn't bronze. It was the 50,000 lives transformed, the billion-dollar partnerships created, the cultural barriers dissolved, and the simple truth that became global movement. Brilliance exists everywhere. Wisdom recognizes it. 5 years later, Keisha stood before the most powerful audience in the World Economic Forum in Davos. Snow fell gently outside the windows as presidents, prime ministers, and CEOs hung on her every word. "5 years ago, I was invisible in a room full of people," she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her a global icon. "Tonight, we've created a world where 50 million people have been truly seen for the first time." The transformation was staggering. Cultural Bridge Institutes operated in 200 cities across 6 continents. The economic impact reached $500 billion in previously untapped human capital. 75 countries had adopted national hidden talent policies. But the numbers, impressive as they were, told only part of the story. Keisha clicked to her next slide, a photo of her 3-year-old twins, Hope and Bridge, playing in their backyard. They'll grow up in a world where worth isn't determined by appearance, where talent is recognized everywhere it exists. We fought to create that world. In the audience, Hiroshi smiled. Now 67, their partnership had become one of business history's greatest success stories. Together, they'd proven that authentic human connection could revolutionize entire industries. The personal updates were equally remarkable. Marcus was now a senior aerospace engineer, regularly mentoring young people from service industry backgrounds. Mrs. Rodriguez had passed peacefully 2 years prior, but not before seeing her neighborhood transformed by scholarship programs bearing her name. Even the antagonists had found redemption paths. David Collins had worked his way up from maintenance to become the Institute's Director of Inclusivity Training, teaching executives about unconscious bias from hard-earned experience. James Morrison, after 3 years of genuine humility and learning, now led the Institute's Corporate Transformation Division. His Harvard credentials mattered less than his authentic transformation. "The ripple effect," Keisha continued, "reaches shores we never imagined." The evidence was everywhere. Top global companies now prioritized cultural intelligence over traditional credentials. Countries with hidden talent programs showed 40% higher GDP growth. Cross-cultural business ventures succeeded at 90% rates versus the pre-Keisha era's 40%. But technology posed new challenges. AI and automation threatened to perpetuate the same biases that once made me invisible, Keisha warned. "Our next mission is ensuring artificial intelligence recognizes human intelligence in all its forms." The Institute's AI Ethics Initiative was already developing hiring algorithms that identified skills over appearances, cultural competency over traditional metrics. Young people were leading the change. 16-year-old Maya Patel, daughter of a scholarship recipient, addressed the forum via video from Mumbai. "My mother was a house cleaner with an engineering degree," Maya said confidently. "Because of what Miss Williams started, I've never doubted my worth. My generation won't need cultural bridge programs. We are the bridge." The torch was passing to those who'd never known a world where talent was invisible. Keisha's final slides showed the Institute's newest expansion, refugee resettlement programs recognizing that displaced doctors, engineers, and teachers were working taxi and delivery jobs across the world. Recognition isn't charity, she emphasized. It's a competitive advantage. The organizations that learn to see talent everywhere now dominate global markets. As her presentation ended, Keisha stepped away from the podium and looked directly into the cameras broadcasting worldwide. Right now, someone brilliant is being overlooked in your workplace, your community, your daily interactions. Someone with exactly the skills our world desperately needs is invisible because we're still learning how to see. Her voice carried the urgency of someone who'd lived that invisibility. Tomorrow, when you interact with anyone providing service, really see them. Ask about their story. Listen to their dreams. You might discover the next engineer, teacher, artist, or leader our world needs. The business case was irrefutable. Companies that recognize hidden talent are 3 times more profitable, 4 times more innovative. Recognition is a competitive advantage. But this wasn't just about profit. It was about human dignity. One conversation can change a life. One life change can transform an industry. One industry transformation can heal our divided world. The action steps were simple but powerful. Notice the people serving you. Ask service workers about their backgrounds and aspirations. Advocate for skills-based hiring. Support cultural bridge programs. Teach children that brilliance has no uniform. Your recognition of one person creates waves that reach shores you'll never see, Keisha concluded. Be someone's Hiroshi. Be someone's bridge to opportunity. The final image filled the screen. Keisha and Hiroshi at the original restaurant table, surrounded by thousands of cultural bridge graduates from every continent, all connected by the simple revolutionary act of being truly seen. Her closing words echoed around the world. Brilliance isn't rare. The courage to see it is. Be brave enough to see. The movement was complete. The invisible had become invaluable, and the world would never be the same.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.